हेलो नमस्ते, हाउ आर यू ऑल? एंड आई एम अगेन बैक विद द पॉडकास्ट सीरीज। और इस बार जो हमारे साथ है, इज अ साइकोलॉजिस्ट, मिस्टर सौरभ। सो ओवर टू यू, अ शॉर्ट इंट्रोडक्शन प्लीज।
Okay, so I'm Saurav Das. Did my bachelor's in psychology from MCHP Manipal. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's in in geopolitics and international relations from DGIR, Mahe.
Geopolitics,
हाँ जी.
like this comes under this psychology only, geopolitics?
नहीं, मेरा जो interest था, it is basically called political psychology. It's a sub branch, I would say, but it's a mix between political sciences and psychology. So what intrigued me, I had basically that मेरा वो एक elective paper था in my fourth sem, and I found that very intriguing क्योंकि जो हमारे TGR के presently who are my professors, they had taught me about political psychology, a brief insight into कैसे अपने political leaders कैसे सोचते हैं, how their psychology, how the way they think basically affects the decision making of countries. तो थोड़ा interpersonal हो जाता है, and also you have the group behavior, social psychology वाला part where how groups behave, group think होता है, bandwagoning होती है, तो लोग एक साथ इकट्ठे होकर जैसे सोचते हैं, they वहाँ पर लॉजिक काम नहीं करता है, that sort of stops. Then the group psychology part takes more into precedence. So my interest was in politics for quite some time, but psychology was my forte. But मैं सोचा कि यार, if I could somehow merge these two fields together, that is how I arrived here. Unfortunately for me, political psychology as a field does not exist academically in India, at least academically. There are people who study about these things. ऐसे लोग हैं who have helped win elections, literally, quite literally. They study, they see how the crowd reacts, basically जो fan following है, and what gets people's attention. So these are very, I would say, like, on a very base level, ये चीजें हैं that makes political psychology very interesting.
I'll talk about this political psychology थोड़ा later. Starting from like after completing your 12th standard, कैसे सोचा कि मतलब psychology जाना है, या you need to do bachelor's in psychology?
I'll take you a little back.
Yeah.
Okay. My personal journey, I will say this. 10वीं के बाद मैंने अपना 10वीं ICC में दिया था. I mean, it's pretty fine. फिर 11वीं में एक हुआ था कि I had lost track. I had actually throughout the year I had flunked pretty bad. मैंने अपने aggregate में 30% marks लाए थे, तो it was a very difficult year for me. पापा ने बोला था कि यार तुमसे ना हो पाएगा basically. और पापा ने बोला था just quit this for now. आओ दुकान में आओ, काम करो, see what you can do. 2 साल जब मैं दुकान में रहा, I felt that I had better things awaiting for me, and that is when I decided to start again. मैंने अपना 11वीं 12वीं फिर से दिया था in a very small place. Trust me, मैं आज जहाँ पर हूँ, forget about psychology. A lot of it has been due to what fate has written for me, what fate has in store for me. I have been a very lucky person in some cases, क्योंकि मैं अपना 11वीं 12वीं के बाद I tried in a lot of places to get for in psychology. Commerce का student था, इतना expectations भी नहीं था कि मिलेगा कि नहीं. But मणिपाल में application दिया था, I did not expect it to work out. But things happen.
Yeah.
And I ended up in Manipal, and here I am. अभी सिर्फ bachelor's नहीं, master's भी कर रहा हूँ. कल पता नहीं कहाँ जाऊँगा, but शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ उस खुदा की जिसके वास्ते मैं यहाँ पर आया हूँ.
So you are being called as a psychologist after completing 3 years of bachelor's?
No, you cannot be called as a psychologist after 3 years. Psychology as a bachelor's course, उसके बाद you usually do not have that much of a career prospect, so to speak. You would only get that अपने masters करना है, either in counseling psychology or in some form, okay. अपना अगर clinical करने जाओगे तो you at least need an MPhil. So that's the most common route in India कि psychology के बात होता है तो it's mostly like bachelors, masters, फिर MPhil. So when you do your MPhil, वो जो 3 साल का होता है, you get RCI certification. RCI certified colleges में ही अगर करोगे, then only you get that certification. Only after that you become a clinical psychologist.
Oh, so there's a like long process.
It is quite a long process. It takes on an average at least 10 years after your 12th.
10 years after completing your 12th.
Hmm.
Achha, I have one question, like what is the need of a psychologist in India? And basically, like you came across doing psychology as in your bachelor's, and after learning so much in psychology, like what is your main work?
Acha, I'll tell you this, okay, psychologist, why it is extremely important in India. I mean, before I throw some stats, let's think about it like this. As individuals, हम जब बड़े हुए हैं, as children, there are a lot of things that, the way we delve into relationships, एक दूसरे के साथ interpersonally, there are a lot of things where, we are just lacking, in the sense that, interpersonally we do not connect a lot of times with each other. People do not have time to understand if a person is mentally fine with something, if a person is okay with something. We just assume that that person will somehow get over it. So when it comes to psychology, understanding the mind, the cognition, how we think, and whether the behavior of a person is socially acceptable is very important. Key point, socially acceptable. That is something I probably talk on later in this podcast, because as you would see, बाद में ऐसा भी होता है कि your social acceptability is also a factor in deciding whether you are okay as a person or not with regards to mental health. So that's a whole different ball game, but if you're willing to question me on that, yeah, that's fine.
No, but you talked about social acceptability.
Yes.
So this is your job. Like मेरा social acceptability क्या है, वो आपको मुझे बताना है या मेरे को आपको बताना है?
I would, on a very base model, I'll tell you this. Okay, psychology में ऐसा होता है. It's especially with regards to clinical psychology. You have a mental health disorder or an issue, or if you feel a problem, you approach a clinical psychologist, tell them what your problems are, present your symptoms, then they'll resort to different methods to treat you. Either it be psychiatrically, as in like they'll provide you medicines, or psychologically in terms of like CBT hai, REBT hai, different methods to so it's not just about social acceptability, but rather what psychologists eventually उनका end goal ये है कि आपका functioning, how are you functioning in society? If you are functioning at the best you are, it's good enough. Okay. और फिर again there are debates. You can say that जो baseline clinical psychology है ना, that focuses a bit more on like keeping away from diseases. जो newer जो perspectives है, counseling psychology, positive psychology, that focuses more on being the best you can be. So that is also a whole another debate.
So after completing your 3 years in psychology, are there any internship programs in your course?
फिलहाल तो मणिपाल में नहीं है, इतना बोल सकता हूँ. There are
मणिपाल वालों सुन लो भाई.
क्या ही करे. बाहर तो है, I would say. There are a lot of places. I would suggest mostly there are online. तो साइकोलॉजी का दैट इज अ बिट सैड कि यार जो देयर आर सम प्लेसेस मैंने सुना था अपने कुछ क्लासमेट्स दे हैड गॉन टू एवी बालिका टू डू देयर इंटर्नशिप्स थोड़ा सा इट्स लाइक अ मंथ्स लॉन्ग इंटर्नशिप देयर दे हैड इंटरेक्टेड विद डिफरेंट पेशेंट्स अपना जिनका साइकाट्रिक डिसऑर्डर्स होता है basically people with schizo or some other psychiatric disorder or or intellectual disability. There are various types of it. Again, you have to open DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 for it. That's a whole different thing. But then we go into all these things, how basically internships में there are again different people focus on different things. पहला internship है अपना ऐसा है कि mental health first aid. So basically you're the first point of contact if you're in trouble, if you're under deep stress, you're very distressed. So you take the help of these apps. You call a person who is doing this, being somebody who provides mental health ka first aid. So then that's how you seek help. Other people they work in community psychologists they work in a wider frame with different people. Old age homes में ये काम करते हैं, they basically work in societies. So psychology is obviously, at least in theory, it is very holistic and also in practically, but India में I mean that does need a bit more scaling up. The how should I say, the allied fields of psychology, if I were to say so, haven't experienced that much growth. And apparently I do have what should I say, an affinity for an allied field in psychology, that is political psychology.
But you are a half psychologist, no? आधा तो हुआ.
The best way I can describe myself is a person who has studied psychology. I cannot sadly call myself a psychologist. उसके लिए at least if I have to be a clinical psychologist, MPhil, minimum MPhil. Counseling psychologist, minimum अपना master's counseling psychology में. Or even if I am somebody doing applied psychology, I can probably do that. I have to do an applied psychology. If I were to call myself a political psychologist today, मुझे अपना applied psychology करना पड़ता MA या MSc. उसके ऊपर I would have to do probably a course in political sciences or international relations. Then probably I'd have to bring in new theories. I would have to work in that field as not maybe as a policy maker, but as an academic, to reach to that extent. So after, obviously, higher education में ऐसा होता है कि as you go higher up the levels, it gets more fuzzy. Distinguishing what you are, it becomes a topic of debate. So, but I would still say that I cannot call myself one. I would obviously love to learn more about psychology. One of my plans is to learn more about psychology later, to take what I'm learning now and to incorporate it in my field.
I have a question, and I know that this question I can ask to you only. Nowadays, I'm seeing a lot of people going through depression and all. Mental health. What is your word on this? What do you think, like, what depression is? And right now, most of the people don't talk about this. And I've seen a lot of people facing mental health issues as well. तो उसके बारे में आप क्या कहना चाहोगे? आपका क्या कहना है कि मतलब आप किस तरीके से देखते हो? And obviously, अगर आप साइकोलॉजिस्ट नहीं हो लेकिन आपने थोड़ा पढ़ाई किया है, so what is your thinking on that?
See, what depression basically is, it is a mood disorder, and at a very base level. तो बात ये है कि your emotions, there is negative affectivity for a very prolonged period of time. Negative affectivity मतलब sadness, यानी कि sadness, grief, दुख, दर्द, पीड़ा जो भी है, it is on a prolonged period of time. It has kept you मतलब अगर if you are normal, your emotions are much more neutral. ठीक है, कभी कभार if something good happens, you're happy. If something bad happens, you're sad. It's okay. You sort of move on. Depression में क्या होता है? That emotion blinds you. You get me? So the point is, why are we seeing more depressed people now more than ever? There are multiple issues. When you can say that the way our lifestyles have changed, the the working hours per week, that has increased a lot. you know then also, people are not interacting with each other. People just don't have the time to interact with each other, and this is, I would say, on a much more general level. I would say societies have become much more individualistic compared to the past. पहले क्या होता था? India is considered as a very collectivistic society. So what I mean by collectivism, as in, people used to fall back on their families. हमारा joint family होता था. ठीक है, आज कुछ होता है तो यू कैन गो, अपने चाचा के साथ बात कर सकते हो, अपने दादाजी, नाना जी, कोई भी होगा घर पे, कैन गो एंड ओपन अप कि आपके साथ ये हो रहा है, क्या कर सकते हैं. आज we literally have nobody to talk to. People literally do not even open up to their own friends.
Yeah,
it's really sad. So in that essence, I would say that it is something. Depression is a legitimate problem, and it is an underdiagnosed problem because there are multiple reports. One report that I can think of properly, at least 1 in 5 people in the whole world have experienced depression at least once in their lifetime, and especially now more so than ever because of a whole host of things. Excessive urbanization, living spaces have become shortened. People have focused much more on themselves than the societies and people around them, and often people do not find meaning in what they do. That is also the case. The cost of living. There are multiple issues that can be said. Standard of living can be counted as an issue, but it's not like it's much more complex. जो base level में है, it's not all of that. So happiness, basically, if you were to put it diametrically opposite जो चीज़ है, जो happiness है, global happiness index वगैरह जो होता है, it is, a lot of it has to do with subjectivity. So it is something. Depression is something that people need help for, and people especially need skills how to deal with. That's where you need psychologists.
But don't you think, like, I've seen a lot of people nowadays misusing the word depression. Like, अरे छोटा मोटा काम अगर नहीं बनता और जब कुछ भी थोड़ा बहुत, like they are taking their hectic schedule कि डिप्रेशन है, कि अगर मेरा आज कुछ नहीं हो रहा है भाई मैं डिप्रेशन में हूँ, मेरे को ये नहीं हो रहा, मेरे फ्रेंड्स मेरे से बात नहीं कर रहे, बंदी छोड़ के चली गई, मैं डिप्रेशन में हूँ. सो डिप्रेशन इज अ वेरी यूनिक थिंग एज एन कि वो सच में एक प्रॉब्लम है. बट हम लोग जो डेली लाइफ में जो चीजें हो रही है हमारे रिलेटेड हमारे जीवन में, वो हम लोग उसको क्या डिप्रेशन का नाम दे रहे हैं कि भाई पैसे नहीं है डिप्रेशन हो गया, बंदी छोड़ के चली गई डिप्रेशन हो गया, दोस्त बात नहीं कर रहे डिप्रेशन हो गया. एंड दे मतलब एट द एंड ऑफ द डे सारा प्रॉब्लम जो है उसको सम अप करके एंड दे आर गिविंग अ नेम डिप्रेशन. दैट इज व्हाट आई फील इज कि डिप्रेशन बहुत एक अलग टॉपिक है, अलग बीमारी है, और जो छोटी मोटी लोगों की प्रॉब्लम्स है वो लोग डिप्रेशन को रिलेट कर दे रहे हैं उसमें.
You're right. In the essence, I would say that एक labeling का भी एक factor होता है. When you have say some issues, आपका say when I talk about depression, okay, it has to be like उसका एक diagnosis होता है कि after a prolonged period of time, ठीक है, आपका negative affectivity it is repeating. There has been X amount of times where you have sort of, how should I say, wanted to unalive yourself. Okay, I mean, maybe first attempt in itself is enough of an indicator. But the point is, it is, उसका एक diagnostic criteria है. Okay, so obviously people जैसे say for example OCD. Just giving you an example. So when people they say very casually about OCD, कि यार ये है, I like to keep my stuff very clean. टेबल वगैरह गंदा करना मुझे पसंद नहीं है. I'm very OCD about it. but what they don't realize is that OCD is a diagnostic term, right? You use it, OCD कब बोलते हो? Basically, a person is scrubbing his body for 4, 5, 6 hours straight. Okay, उसका जो skin में पूरे छाले पड़ जाएंगे, वो the skin starts coming out. So that level of अपने जो social function, अपने जो functioning में है, when it starts getting affected. Also, the weird part about depression, as you said, it's also about belief. You're right. If you believe that you are in depression, ठीक है, and वो एक self-serving bias हो जाता है. You start picking those instances कि यार मेरे ये चीजें हो रहे हैं. You're not satisfied with yourself. That is when you start thinking कि यार मेरे
depression है. Like the very best you said about OCD problem. अरे सबको भाई सब चीज ऑर्डर में रखना पसंद है. मेरे को भी बुक ऐसे रखना है, सीधे रखना है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि मेरे को OCD है.
Exactly. OCD is that's what I'm saying. ये जो चीजें हैं, it's a very diagnostic term. It's much advanced कि यार तुम्हारा जो problem है, you cannot probably function properly in society. अपने साथ you're not feeling comfortable at all. जो the people who have OCD, उनका जो pain है, साइकोलॉजिकल ट्रॉमा है, वो बहुत है. ठीक है, ट्रॉमा probably wouldn't be the word, but the pain that they experience, it's quite a lot.
And it's so unfair on the people who are actually suffering from all these things like OCD, depression. और ये छोटे छोटे मैं देखता हूँ आजकल ये बालक 18 साल के 17 साल के डिप्रेशन में है. क्या डिप्रेशन है भाई?
देखो भाई, मैं इतना बोलूंगा कि लाइफ एक्सपीरियंसेस आर सब्जेक्टिव. Okay, as much as I understand, there has been a general misuse of labeling these terms. We cannot count out, the experiences, the subjective experiences that people have. It is important that we acknowledge and that we address their problems. But at the same time, it is also important that these people educate themselves what it is and to understand how they can solve their problems in a very basic way. I would say psychology is about problem solving on a very personal level. I would say that
psychology and spirituality, does it make sense? Like, does it correlated?
Yes, it does. We have something, at least I had papers on Indian perspectives of psychology, positive psychology. We talk about flow. What do you say when you are in flow? Okay, it's a concept by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. When you are in flow, तुम्हारे आसपास कुछ नहीं दिखता. You are very focused on your task. It is very difficult for you to move on. For me, I would say spirituality is about, how should I say? You found something that you relate with. Okay, it's not just about कि यार connection with a higher being. It can be connection, sometimes it is connection with a higher being, connection with a higher cause, but it can be spirituality. It is you being in yourself, comfortable in your own skin. That too can be, I wouldn't call it spirituality though. It is more spontaneity, but it is at least, I would say, one step closer to spirituality. And again, spirituality is, in my eyes, it is how should I say, you working towards what you consider the goal, the objective, or you working towards the objective of you being alive, right? So I would say my objective is, how should I say, it is to understand my surroundings better. It is that gives me happiness. That is spirituality in its own way.
Yeah. Being in the presence is also in spirituality.
Yes, in essence, you are being spontaneous, you are being in the present, in the moment. So spirituality, and even if you take the aspects of metaphysics and you include it into psychology, how does that make people feel? It is also important because ऐसा भी है, when I was talking about Indian perspectives, there is also the impact of what Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Sri Krishna, how that is important कि उन्होंने जो सिखाया है कि तुम अपना कर्म करो बाकी सब हम देख लेंगे क्योंकि your job as a human is to do the task that you're assigned. Think about it. It is a very simple concept, and these things have been given. अपने Upanishads हैं. Obviously, we have our brilliant epics, the Ramayana, Mahabharata. So, in essence, we have a lot to learn about. Also, I would share a very funny instance. Okay, this is I would say a bit of a taboo subject, but मुझे ये it sort of intrigues me.
Taboo.
Taboo as in like it is forbidden in society. That's what I mean by taboo. About Kama Sutra. When people talk about Kama Sutra, they mostly talk about sexual positions and stuff. It's not just about that. It is also how you present yourself in society. What the explicit parts are actually just one very small portion of the whole book. It is all about how you present yourself, how you interact with people in a society. आप कैसे एक society में रह के how you make the most about it, most from it. That is what Kama Sutra advocates for. So if you look at it, it is also there is the perceptual bias, you see. We only cherry pick what we like from different things. So even when it comes to spirituality, I guess it is something that where we need perspectives, we need a more holistic perspective to understand these things.
So before finishing all these things, I just want to ask last question. Like after your facial expression also, I can easily figure out कि आप कितना अच्छे से मतलब psychology को पढ़े हो और काफी अच्छा लग रहा है आपने जो किया ये सब.
हाँ जी.
You are like it's interested no?
बहुत.
अच्छा एक एडवाइस जो अपने जूनियर्स को देना चाहोगे जो साइकोलॉजी अभी कर रहे हैं.
My juniors, what's most important that first and foremost, attend every class. It is important that you go relate it with instances in your life. That's how I personally was very involved in classes, and it also made a lot of sense to me. I wanted to learn more from every session. Uske upar I would say, it is very important to socialize. Just don't be stressed about stuff. Socialize. You'll probably learn more from your friends sometimes than just from your classes, and also about how they interact with each other. Those are really things that you would have great fun in probably discussing it with, rather than just keeping it to a book, just learning from that passively. That won't do much. And for my Mahe juniors, I would say just go committee mein jao, mauj karo, participate in different things, sports, cultural activity, jo bhi aaye, just karte rehna. Other than that, I would say non-Mahe juniors, yes, just keep enjoying.
So last question, do you have any like end goal after completing your psychology and something?
Psychology ka end goal, I would say it is not completely coherent. मेरा जो career path जो है, because obviously मैंने बोला है, there is no straightforward academic path to be a political psychologist. I would have to probably maybe do a master's in psychology. I don't know. मेरा PhD भी हुआ शायद. I just don't know. It's where fate takes me. But my job would be to enlighten a larger group of people about how, because there's always the distinction between states and people who rule states versus people, organizations, because obviously people who rule states, they are, there's the concept of the Leviathan, okay, I guess by Thomas Hobbes, if I'm not wrong, where, the state sort of like cuts back on some of the rights of the people. Okay, so and also people, even though they have the right to elect a government in today's day and age, a lot of democracies have that. Even then, it is up to the rulers who are ruling the states to take the decisions. That's where the distinction comes in. My probably job would be to enlighten a larger population on how leaders think क्योंकि आज के डेट में इंडिया में not just in India, a lot of countries, democracies especially, there's a lot of polarization. There's a lot of speak about, oh, you're from this party or that party, and so you're thinking, we tend to generalize कि यार ऐसे सोचते होंगे. But sometimes the reasoning for why they make their political decisions, understanding it better from an enlightened point of view, from taking a step back, from a third person point of view, being neutral, you'll probably understand it much better. So maybe that is my end goal, hopefully.
So a couple of days, or I think 3 days before I met you, you were saying something good about me.
Oh yes. By the way, Abhay ji, I would just say that I'm inspired by a weight loss journey. 120 odd kilos to 80 odd, 85 odd kilos. You're something of an inspiration to me. मेरा भी थोड़ा कटवट हो गया तो I'd be I'd be really happy. Other than that, I would say to me, my classmates, and I'm very open about this, have been an inspiration, past and present. Shout out to all my classmates who are watching this. You have continued to inspire me, and you continue to influence me in different ways for the better, hopefully. And I mean, I would say about them, it's always about looking for things. When I talk about the first sort of people that come to my mind are who actually have given me a different perspective to things, made me understand things from a different point of view. क्योंकि कभी कभार ये ऐसा होता है कि यार we think things through one way.
Yeah.
Friends do that. Friends, classmates, they give you a different point of view. A chance to look at things from somebody else's perspective. And just on an end note, I would just say this, and this still touches me, inspires me to this day. That's on an end note, I would say.
So thank you so much for coming to the podcast, and
it is my pleasure. Thank you for bringing me here.
No, it's an honor for me as well, and it was such a warm and deep conversation we had on the show. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned, stay healthy, and stay connected. And please do watch it. अच्छा लगे तो share करो, and till then, stay happy.